Welcome back to chapter 1. In this video, we're going to be discussing developmental processes. When we think about developmental processes or how children change, there are 3 processes that I want you all to think about. The first process is the biological process. When you think about the biological process, I want you to think about the physical changes that a child goes through. So, for example, children may get taller. They may be able to hold a pen and use that pen to write. Compared to when they were a baby, they may not have been able to grasp things right away. Even thinking about how weight fluctuates as children get older. Most of the time, when we see babies, they are a little heavier, but as children grow and get taller, then they begin to lose weight because they get taller. Not only do children change biologically, they also change cognitively. When you think about cognitive processes, I want you to think about thought or cognitive skills. So, for example, children may, as they get older, they may be able to solve more intense puzzles because they're able to they have a higher cognitive ability to be able to solve more in-depth puzzles. And children may also go from using 1-word sentences to 2-word sentences to 15-word sentences. All of that is a part of cognitive processes. And lastly, the developmental process that children go through, another one is the socio-emotional process. And when we think about social and emotional processes, think about personality. You may also want to think about how children interact with other people and the emotions that they may or may not display. So, for example, when we think about the socio-emotional process, a parent may touch their child and the child may learn to smile in response to their parent's touch. Biological processes, cognitive processes, and socio-emotional processes all interact as children develop. There are also various periods of development. The first period of development is the prenatal period. And I want you all to look at that word prenatal. You think about natal, that means to be born. But look at the word pre, that means before. So when we think about the prenatal period, we think about the time when the child is in the mother's womb. The next stage or the next period of development is infancy. And infancy is after a child is born up until the age of about 2 years. The next period of development is early childhood. And early childhood begins around the age of 2 years old, so around the age of 24 months, and it goes up until about the 5 or 6 year old age. This is also known as the preschool years because preschool in the United States is not, you do not have to go to preschool. It's not required for someone to go to attend a preschool, but it is required for children to begin school once they reach about 6 years old. That's when 5 or 6 years old, that's when they would start kindergarten. But it's preschool because you're not technically in an elementary school yet. Couple more periods of development. The next period of development is middle and late childhood. And this is around the age of 6 and 11 years of age. And this is when the child is in elementary school. The last period of development is adolescence. That starts at around 11 years old and it ends at about 18 or 19 years old. This is a time when someone would transition from childhood to early adulthood. So this is that in-between stage of being a child and being an adult. Although most developmental scientists believe that the periods of development includes biological, cognitive, and socio-emotional processes, many scientists still have conflicting opinions on development and its impact on children. So we'll get more into that in the next slide. One issue in development is the nature versus nurture issue. This is not so much a huge debate as it was many years ago, but it is something that people still ponder. When we talk about nature, we're talking about genes, cells, your DNA, your biological inheritance, what's passed down to you from your parents. And when we talk about nurture, we're talking about the environmental experiences. So you may have grown up in the city compared to someone that grew up in a rural area on a farm. Or you may have went to school, been homeschooled. Or you may have went to school, actually gone to class to a building outside of your home to be taught. All of those are a part of environmental experiences. And so when we talk about the nature versus nurture issue, where the scientists are trying to figure out what's the primary influence on children's development? Is it nature? Is it the environment they grow up in? Or is it their genes? There are other issues in development. Another issue in development is continuity or discontinuity. And when we talk about continuity, we're trying to understand and see development as gradual, cumulative change. So let's look at this picture on the top here to talk about continuity. Let's take the oak seed that's pictured here, for example. This is an oak seed and you plant it into the ground and eventually it will become and look and function more like an oak tree. The reason why it's continuity is because the oak seed was always an oak. It just had not reached its full development to actually look like an oak tree. But it was always an oak tree, right? It was always an oak. An example of continuity is puberty. You do not look the same when you start puberty compared to when you end, but you are still a human. You just through puberty, you're turning into your final form. Even as you pass puberty, you still grow and change. So that's the cumulative, the gradual change. But let's talk about discontinuity too. And discontinuity deals with distinct changes. So let's think about how the life cycle of a butterfly. Butterflies don't start off as butterflies. Butterflies start off as larvae and turn into caterpillars. And then they eventually morph into a butterfly. But a butterfly is different than a caterpillar, right? So you see, those are distinct changes. A butterfly is very different than a caterpillar. An example of that in terms of human children development would be thinking abstractly. For example, a child that is 1 is just not able to think abstractly. They're not able to picture things that are not there. They have issues with that. But as children get older, they do eventually gain that skill. So discontinuity deals with distinct changes, and continuity, it deals with just a gradual cumulative change over time. Another issue in development is the early-later experience. When we talk about the early-later experience, we're trying to really determine a child's what has the most impact on children's development. It can be early experiences, such as when children are born or when children are 1 or 2 years old, or their later experiences when they are teens, or when they hit puberty, or when they start school. What the issue that the scientists are debating is what has the most influence on the child's development, their early experiences or their later experiences. So the question is now, what's the verdict on issues in development? Is it nature or nurture? Do children's earlier experience have more impact on their development or their later experiences? What I want you all to know is that all of the dichotomies that we talked about, nature versus nurture, we talked about early experiences versus later experiences, all of those have an impact on development. Development is not one or the other, but a mixture of all of those issues that we talked about. However, I do want you all to know that scientists still heavily debate which may impact the child more. But ultimately, all of those experiences impact children. I'll see you on the next video.